plan. All righty. So I am really excited. Some of you already met him to introduce this month's guest, Ryan. And I first met Ryan because he was my instructor at the Climate Farm School, which I'm sure you're going to chat a little bit about today, Ryan. But I'm mostly excited because this group is all about figuring out, like, how do we get from where we are right now in these seats to either career or a lifestyle or a more robust balance of hobbies and career and lifestyle in the regenerative space. And Ryan, I think your particular story is really great because you really did a strong pivot into the regenerative ag space. And I love the balance that you bring to it, where you really are interested in kind of whole systems. It's not just ag and soil, it's really sort of all of the things that go into that. It's the ecosystem restoration, it's the food, it's the agroecology. So I'm going to hand the reins off to Ryan, and he's going to take it away. And when we finish up, we'll have our usual Q&A. So make sure that you're scribbling those down as you go. And Ryan, I will give you a little 5 minutes if we need it, but I know that you're planning on keeping some nice space for Q&A.
Definitely.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Caroline, Diana, for having me. It's very cool. I'm super excited just about what you all are up to. The more people that are getting into this space, the better. And it's such an incredibly fun space to work in because of the type of people that it attracts. So very cool to be meeting more people like that. And I appreciate the invite. I'm going to share my screen here and just go through a couple of slides, starting with this one. So can you see that? I don't know if everybody recognizes the person in that picture.
God.
I, as Caroline said, met Caroline last year at Climate Farm School. This is a picture from the school. So I'm an instructor and associate director for the Climate Farm School. We teach people about regenerative agriculture and food systems. So we bring people like Caroline and others who are either already in the space or interested in getting into the space or interested in just growing their own personal adventure in regenerative agriculture and food systems in some way. And we do a combination of online learning for 4 weeks, and then we spend a week, and that's the best part, we spend a week on a farm together. It's usually groups of 8 to 12 people living and working together, learning directly from farmers and food systems experts. And yeah, living in community. And it's the best job that I've ever had. It's incredible to help bring people along a journey that I've been going on for the past 7 or so years now. So I couldn't help but share that picture because that is what the best part of my job looks like. But I think what I'll do today, and I know that you're all at kind of various points on your journey, and so some of what I share will be a little bit redundant, but what I know and have learned about regenerative agriculture really is very interwoven with my own personal career journey. So I'm going to talk a little bit about both at once, and I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, although it's an easy topic for me to sort of go off the rails on. And then I would love to just have a conversation with all of you about where you're at and what you're thinking about doing. So I came to California in 2016 when I was 26 years old. I had started my career in finance. I worked on Wall Street for 4 years. I studied finance in Boston as an undergrad student. And I was honestly just extremely troubled by the problems that I saw facing society and the planet. And it was just from reading the newspaper. It wasn't any major sort of event or epiphany. It was more of this slow burn of realizing there is environmental destruction happening. There's climate change is getting more and more serious. There's problems of inequity and social isolation and an epidemic of chronic disease. And working on Wall Street, I felt like I sort of had a front row seat to the mindsets that caused a lot of those issues. So I couldn't really keep doing what I was doing anymore. But I also had no idea what I wanted to do at that moment. So I also, having grown up in the Northeast, was sort of tied to this idea of work defining your life, achievement being sort of a necessary part of your life. And so I wasn't quite ready to give up that pursuit of achievement. And I decided to go to grad school really just as cover while I figured out what to do next. And then that's what brought me to California. I ended up at UC Berkeley and in a sustainable development program called the Master of Development Practice, which was interdisciplinary. And I chose that program because it was super broad, but I'm extremely grateful because while I was there, I got interested in and very quickly became obsessed with food systems. It seemed that food systems were at the core of all of the problems that I had become concerned about. If they weren't the primary cause, then they were definitely a leading example of that. And so there were a number of courses that I took, some on agroecology, some on business and food entrepreneurship. There was a case study competition that Patagonia was doing at the time. They no longer do it, unfortunately, but that year, the Patagonia case study competition was focused on their provisions line of food, which many of you may have heard about. And it was all about how to promote regenerative agriculture. And so through these experiences, my eyes were open to really to two major things. One is that our food system and the way that we grow food is a total mess. If you think about what is the worst possible way we could grow and distribute food, that is by and large what we're doing in the United States, and unfortunately exporting that a bit around the world as well. But the second thing that I learned, which was incredible and incredibly hopeful, is that there's 100% an alternative to do this, and we know how to do it. I learned about it as agroecology. It's now kind of in vogue as regenerative agriculture. But it was the most hopeful thing that I had ever come across in terms of environment or climate change. And so,
okay, man. Well, I will.
we gotta can meet that. Yeah, so it was one of the most hopeful things that I had come across. I was blown away that more people weren't talking about it. And a fire was just totally lit for me, which I was really grateful for, having kind of come from a place where I was doing what I was doing because I fell into it by and large, and because that's what I thought was expected. So I thought that I would touch very quickly, and I think this group kind of knows this, but on what's wrong with conventional agriculture. Why is it such a problem? And it's pretty much ubiquitously a problem. Everything about it is a negative externality. So there's environmental degradation and resource depletion. There's soil mismanagement and lack of cover crops leads to high water use and low water use efficiency. Agrochemicals result in greenhouse gas emissions and biodiversity destruction. Landscape simplification also contributes to that. You can see here on the slide, so forgive me for just reading through, but I feel like these are really important things to remember, especially if you're trying to tell the story to other people. So it's also incredibly detrimental to public health, both through agrochemicals, but also because of lack of diversity in what we grow. If you look at what we grow in this country versus what we should be eating for a healthy diet, it could not be a bigger gap. And there's some really interesting kind of photos and depictions of that you can find online from Marion Nestle that compare what we subsidize and what we grow in this country versus what we tell people is a healthy diet. It also makes us extraordinarily vulnerable. I mean, monocrops are so vulnerable to pest outbreaks and diseases. They're also vulnerable to biological warfare, and they just can't withstand extreme weather events. If you go to wherever you are, you go to the closest national park, you will see an incredible amount of diversity, and that's what a healthy system looks like that can withstand shocks. If you go to most of the farms in this country, you will see the opposite of what a natural ecosystem looks like. So that's a picture of what's wrong with conventional agriculture. And I was really interested initially, now I've become interested in all of it, but I was initially interested largely with ecosystem restoration. And that's what I had gone to school thinking I would do something about, either minimizing energy use or our footprint in urban development. But what struck me, in addition to just learning about food systems externalities in general, is that if you're interested in restoring ecosystems, you can't ignore agriculture. So this picture is from Our World in Data, and it just shows what a large footprint agriculture has. If you take all of our vegetable and grain production and livestock production and the grains we grow for livestock, it covers basically all of North and South America, China, and most of Southeast Asia. So there's many people, and I experienced this in school too, there's many ecologists who are interested in ecological restoration, and they just want to focus on pristine areas and preserving those and maybe growing those like national parks. And that is amazing, and I love that and encourage that work to keep happening, but you can't do ecological restoration without addressing agriculture, because it impacts just far too much of the land. You need the space between those national parks to also be healthy habitat and to create clean water and clean air. So that kind of blew my mind. And then again, what I learned about as agroecology is so incredible, because all of those issues that I highlighted 2 slides ago are basically turned on their head by an agroecological farm. They dramatically reduce off-farm inputs. If you have a healthy, diversified farm ecosystem, healthy soils can capture more carbon, hold water. They increase biodiversity, they protect wildlife, they promote public health through both the ecosystem services that are provided of clean water, clean air, carbon capture, and they also just grow healthier food, not only because there's a wide diversity on the farm, but we're now learning that a lot of the food is more nutritionally dense, and it also has microbial communities that it turns out we co-evolved with and really need. And it makes us much more resilient. The closer a farm ecosystem can get to a natural ecosystem, the more resilient to extreme weather events, which we're obviously experiencing more of, will be. It also makes farmers more economically resilient when they have diverse farms. If one crop fails, they have other crops to sell. If one crop succumbs to a market pressure, they have other crops to sell. So it just, with anything like your diversified investment portfolio or a business portfolio, you're going to have more resilience if you have diversity. So I'm not sure. I think I sent you, Caroline, an article to pass around. Cool. From Civil Eats. This is a picture that if you open that article, you would have seen. This is Singing Frogs Farm, which Caroline has been to at least once. They're up in Sebastopol, so hour and a half north of where I live in Berkeley, California. And they grow, it's a 7-acre property. They grow an incredible amount of food. They have a 200-member CSA. You can see we had a huge amount of rain in California this past winter, and you can see this picture here is the farm just after a rain event or maybe during an event on the left, and then that back field there that's covered in water 24 hours later is totally drained. There are factors like the hydrology of the land that play into this, but what happened is all of the water left that landscape by either absorbing into it or receding back into the stream with zero runoff. And they can measure the runoff there because they have these ponds in the very back of the field where they will see if soil has washed away from the crops that you can see in the front. And so Singing Frogs Farm is a no-till organic vegetable farm. They implement basically every soil health practice. They don't integrate livestock, but they certainly have a lot of animals passing through the farm, and they do have a ton of birds and insects and things like that. So I would say they hit on every one of the soil health principles. They've built up their soil organic matter from 2% to over 12% in a period of 10 years. And so it's just a really incredible place where you can really see what the impacts are of this stuff. So when I was in school, I looked at all of these different angles that I sort of touched on, the public health angle, the ecology, the business angle. And I finished, fortunately, unfortunately, with a thesis on the Farm Bill and studying food policy, which is totally mind-blowing when you start to learn about the federal ag policy. And actually, I'll share this around, or I've shared it with Caroline, and she can feel free to share it around. We're going to have a talk. We're hosting an online talk next week with a Farm Bill expert, Nina Ichikawa, who I learned a ton from about the Farm Bill when I was working on my master's project. But as I was learning about this stuff, all I wanted to do was talk about it and tell people around me. And some people were interested, but by and large, I learned that most people are not very interested in hearing about policy and the Farm Bill. And people don't like to be preached at. They really do not like that. And it was hard not to, because I was learning so much and I was so excited. But I very quickly realized that even the people I thought would be most interested, that delivery mechanism was just not super effective. But I did love to cook. I had always cooked for friends. I never really developed that. I hadn't done intentional practice, I think, as you would call it. Like, I hadn't developed that as a real skill set. I just loved doing it. But what I was learning about food, I started to express more through my cooking. And when I was cooking for people at just dinner parties coming over on a Sunday night, or cooking for people while I was supposed to be working on statistics, doing homework and stuff, I realized that when you're cooking, especially if the food is half decent, it totally changes the conversation, or creates a conversation that may not have existed otherwise. So I started to source things better, get interested in where things were coming from. If the food was good, people would ask questions. And the amazing thing about eating is you're literally opening your body up to take things in. And I think that is true for information too. People start to get curious and ask questions. And when people ask questions, then they listen. Then they listen to what you're saying, because they're starting to direct the conversation. So it's really great to open up people's curiosity in that way. So I realized how powerful cooking was. I still didn't necessarily think it was a viable career path, but I landed in the right place being in Berkeley, and I got this incredible opportunity to work at a restaurant here called Chez Panisse that's sort of famous for farm to table cooking and growing that movement. And there I really started to learn about food systems through at least one lens, because Chez Panisse sources directly from farmers. They've had relationships with some farms for over 45 years. And there's nothing that can replace actually touching the food and seeing where it's coming from and cooking it and seeing people take it into their body. So I learned a lot there, more than I really thought that I would. And I was there for a year and a half. From there, I left with one of the chefs from Chez Panisse to go to Southern California to a place called the Ecology Center, which is a regenerative farm and ecological education center. They have a farm stand, they have education programs, and then they have a 14-acre, basically a huge market garden. I started a chicken program there, and I helped develop their culinary and food systems education program. So I was there for a year. And then eventually I met a woman named Lainey Siegner. I was back in Berkeley for, I was just sort of passing through. I had left the Ecology Center, wasn't sure what I was going to do next, was back here cooking and thinking about how to educate more people and how to bring my network together and do that. And I helped the guy on the left side of your screen here, Gary Podesta. This is also from the course that Caroline was at, who is an amazing chef. He needed some help doing a dinner one night, and it was for this program called the Climate Farm School. It's funny, I almost did not do it. I was supposed to go to Hawaii. I was going to be woofing on a farm for a little while and trying to figure out what was next. And Gary told me about Climate Farm School, and I said, you know, that sounds really cool, but to be honest, there's so many people doing cool stuff in this space. It's really hard to get funding. I don't know that I really want to change my flight to Hawaii to help you with the dinner. But it seemed like he did need some help, and he wasn't finding anybody else. So I moved my flight a day, and I came to help him cook this dinner, and it was just totally amazing. Hang on one second. I just got a message that my screen is about to shut down, so let me address that. Don't know why. Okay. Hopefully that doesn't happen. We'll just see in 10 minutes. So I helped Gary. I was at this dinner, and then I realized that this course where people were living together and eating together and being directly with farmers for a week was totally deeply impacting people. And everybody that I talked to while in the course of preparing this dinner was just having a life-changing experience. And so I spoke to Lainey and I said, you know, I'd love to help you with this and build this program. Further, I have a background beside cooking. I have some education in this. I've worked on a few farms in various capacities. So if you ever need help, and lucky for me, she was pregnant at the time and did need help because she had some courses that she needed a co-instructor for, and so, or a person to fully take over for. Caroline was at the first course actually that I led. So sorry for any bumpiness in that one. But yeah, so I got the opportunity to become a part of this program, and it is really one of the best jobs that I've ever had, because I just brought you through a little bit of my journey, and I feel like I get to do that in an accelerated way for other people and kind of share the things that it took me a little while to learn. And now I feel like we can do a lot of it, at least sparking people's excitement within a week. So, so I think that's it for my sort of formal remarks portion of it, but I would love to hear from you all and answer any questions and just have a conversation.
Yay, thanks, Ryan. Do you want to stop sharing and we can gather back? That was awesome. Also, you're being too humble. You're a fantastic instructor. Questions for Ryan, folks. Also, welcome Ben, who made it off the river. Glad to see you.
Nice.
I know he's on his phone, so maybe he's...
Well, thank you, Ryan. I just wanted to also take a moment to introduce Soil Centric's co-founder, who's Kyle Lawson down at the bottom. You didn't get to meet him from the get-go, but I love your journey. It's so interesting how people think like your rational mind says like everyone should be interested in the Farm Bill. And I know this because years ago, you probably came across a book called Food Fight by Dan Imhoff.
Mhm.
That Ben knows Dan well. Anyway, I'm on his board, Watershed Media.
Oh, wow.
And years ago, I met a congressman named Ron Kind from Wisconsin who said, you know, the Farm Bill's coming up. It's the biggest piece of legislation that impacts food in America, and no one's ever heard of it. So I went to my friend Dan. I said, we've got to write a book on the Farm Bill. And he almost had a
Wow.
stroke, but we did it anyway. And it's gone through several revisions. And it's the most boring thing you can possibly imagine. The
Book
Farm
is great, though. I would not
book
have
is great. Book is
complete
great.
my work without that, honestly. So
Yeah.
I recommend, I think now I forget what the new iteration is called, but I have it on my shelf.
It's
So.
been it was updated last year, and Dan didn't want to go back to it. So another person was hired to like do the revisions. But you're right, it's so much more inviting to bring people in through a meal, even though our rational mind says, well, this isn't going to be as impactful as like writing a book about the Farm Bill. But it's so visceral. And I love what you said about not only does it nourish our body, like literally like you're taking the food in, but it also makes you more receptive to having that conversation. So so thank you for that. And I'd love for you to, everyone to ask Ryan questions, because he's clearly given this a lot of thought and been very brave in making some big pivots from the comfort of, Wall Street and a pretty secure financial future to something pretty wide open and making it up as you go along.
A little less secure for sure, but way more rewarding.
And I think that's where a lot of us find ourselves.
Yeah.
I have a question. I probably have several, but I'll start here. So you said the farm school is a week long, but then you also were saying something about introducing people to food. I mean, to the idea of regenerative agriculture or agroecology through food. Are those two things connected, or were you talking about two different things there? Like, what does the week-long farm school experience look like compared to like the dinner you were talking about?
So that dinner was sort of the graduation dinner. It was the culmination dinner at the end of a week. Though I will say we have been thinking about ways to make the dinner a standalone event. Since I'm sure it was an amazing meal when Caroline was there. And since then, Gary, who is a brilliant, somewhat obsessive, and very dedicated chef. Oh yeah, actually
he's literally texting me right now.
That's amazing.
It's very funny.
So he has gone, he has taken it many steps further and created a meal that really tells the story of aspects of regenerative agriculture. The last one we did, it was 5 courses, and each course was a principle of soil health, and you could experience that principle on your plate, whether it be through immense diversity or animal integration. And so we're thinking of ways to make that a standalone event. I will say I've had the privilege of being a part of a bunch of farm dinners, and there's such a cool community in the Bay Area of cooks and chefs. And we also work closely with a place called Ramen Shop, where we've done some pop-ups trying to educate people. So I think there's a bunch of different ways to do it, but I think if you just make really good food and you can add a little bit of education in there around the food, there is an opportunity to kind of get people excited in a shorter period of time.
Is there anywhere I could like look this up online, or is it kind of like an invite thing that you just would see by being associated with the stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely follow for things that we're going to do at Ramen Shop. You could follow Ramen Shop on Instagram. You could follow me on Instagram. I am somewhat active sometimes. You can follow Climate Farm School.
Okay.
And then, certainly I'll share, I think when and if we decide to do standalone dinners, then I can share that with all of you. We'll be trying to promote it as much as possible.
That would be great.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah. Thank you, Diana, for that. Yeah. And I should have probably directed you as a instructor of this program to the website, but we still have a bunch of courses available this year in California, in New York, one up in Washington, actually, in the San Juan Islands in September, although it seems like you're very deep in this field anyway, but yeah, we do the courses all over, and we still have a bunch of open courses this year.
Very cool.
And I don't know if I'm supposed to share this, but when I did mine course at the Climate Farm School, folks, I reached out to Tara.do and received a scholarship. So if you're looking at the price point, you're like, oh, that'd be fun, but it's expensive. I don't know if that's still something they're offering, Ryan, but that's definitely an option. And it was really easy, and it's definitely the reason I was able to participate. So just something else to note.
Yeah, we do have scholarships available. It's limited to some extent, but we try to make it as accessible as possible. That's definitely the goal.
Abby, I saw that you were unmuting and remuting yourself. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I guess I do. I guess I know this is a bit broad, but I was wondering advice you have on like building connections in like regen ag communities in general. Also, I was gonna say this before, but I can totally relate to your like farm bill obsession. I took an ag policy class last semester and we went all into it, and I was like, oh my god, that's so relatable.
Yeah, it's crazy. And this is a farm bill year, and it is a huge opportunity to impact the food system. So, and once you dive in, I'm still resistant, even though I kind of follow policy, I am still resistant. And then every few weeks, I'm like, all right, I got to find out what's going on. As soon as I start reading about it, it's like very interesting. It's just, for some reason, that word policy is like, you want to distance yourself. As to your question about making connections, I would say one wonderful thing, and I mentioned this earlier, about this field is how open everybody is. And maybe I have a direct contrast from having worked on Wall Street, where I did make some great friends, but generally it's much more competitive. And in this space, everybody wants to help. Everybody is aligning around generally the broad same set of goals. So I would just say, don't hesitate to reach out to people that you're interested in talking to. I think most people, they're not in this space for money by and large. I hope that it can be financially sustainable, but that's certainly not what brings people to it. So usually they're here because they're excited and they're interested, and they want to share that with people. So certainly visiting farms, talking to farmers about their practices, if you can do a tour on a farm, and then reaching out to anybody else in the space. I have had unbelievable success with just cold reaching out to people, and people are just excited that there's other people in the space who want to help grow the movement. So and certainly I would offer to anybody here any connections that I can make for you. If you poke through my LinkedIn or think that I might know somebody through Climate Farm School, I'm happy to help. I think we're all sort of trying to be like good mycelium and make these connections and make the network stronger. So I think I would be happy to be that person for anybody.
Yeah, and just to Ryan's point, if you have it on your LinkedIn, like, if you haven't already added that you're a Regenerative Action Ambassador, use that as a calling card. You can say like, hey, I'm Abby, I'm just growing my network in this space, and I am part of this program, and it's part of the program I'm trying to meet more people. So you can, show that you have some sort of credential and some sort of like, that you're committed, even as you're exploring your path and your next steps. So you can do that too on Instagram. I've made a lot of new friends on Instagram that I didn't ever think I would make, just by chatting with people. Some people tend to get overwhelmed with email. So if I find LinkedIn is a really good way to be concise and zero in on someone you might want to meet and say like, hey, we have this person in common, and then go for it from there, or Instagram if you don't get a good reception or any reception at all from email.
Yeah, I will also suggest showing up. at farms and a place like the Ecology Center, which is not far from you, because farmers particularly tend to not be online very often, but when you're in person with them, it can be incredible. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Abby, were you still looking for potential housing in Sonoma?
It's like back and forth. I'm a bit of a wreck right now, but
Well, when it's on the backs or the fourth side, I don't know, whichever side of that is moving you towards Sonoma, Ryan definitely knows some folks up there.
okay.
Last time I chatted with Abby Ryan, she was poking around for some housing options. So
oh, cool. Yeah, I would be happy to connect you with people. It's not an easy place to find housing, but I can put you in touch with people who have at least a lot of land. So
Thank you.
Ryan, hey, thank you so much for your presentation and your sharing your journey. It's really interesting and helpful to hear about how you got to the space that you are now. I had two questions for you. The first question was, I am particularly interested in the urban agroecology space, and I'm very curious to hear what you think about um, scale and impact. And a lot of the opportunities that you've mentioned were like more focused on like rural opportunities within regenerative ag. And I'm just curious to hear what kind of unique opportunities do you think that urban agroecology spaces offer? And my second question was related to how you were mentioning here in the Bay Area how we have so many amazing like connections between chefs working with farmers, and one connection that came to mind was Wapepa's Kitchen working with Deep Medicine Circle, which is a rooftop farm in Oakland that's very focused on indigenous land rematriation. And I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are on the conversation about indigenous land stewardship and land back within regenerative agriculture.
cool. Where are you in the Bay?
I'm in San Francisco.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, so for urban ag, I think it's incredibly important. There's a ton of opportunity. I definitely do work more with rural farmers, though the Ecology Center that I worked with, I would classify as an urban farm. It was a dense suburban area that it was in. But I think urban agriculture, one, it's incredibly important because it's local. Two, and you probably know a lot of this, it can provide really important ecosystem services in spaces that need it. Clean air, clean water, green space for sort of mental health. And we definitely, there's a huge kind of community of urban farmers in Oakland that we're connected to as well. So yeah, I can't speak to like what career opportunities exist, except that there is an abundance of urban farming and places trying to make that much more of a reality. I think one really cool thing that's happening in the East Bay in particular with that is the connection between healthcare and urban agriculture. So there's a place called Urban Tilth that is in Richmond, and they're connected with a Richmond community clinic. There's a woman named Daphne Miller who sources from them and then feeds into like a prescriptions for health program. So I think that part is really cool. Not only providing health by people going to urban farms, but then also getting their sort of local food there. So there's a huge opportunity for it for sure. And the Climate Farm School is working to develop our community in New York as well, because we have a few graduates of the program who are working on urban ag in Brooklyn. So anyway, I highly encourage you to poke around the space. I think it's a massive opportunity and a need. And it also helps to bridge the rural urban gap because people kind of get a view of what's happening outside the city. So I think both are important. In terms of the indigenous communities, I think it's massively important. I'm glad that I wrote down the name of that kitchen. I wasn't familiar with them. But I think most farmers that I work with recognize that these principles of regenerative agriculture are all principles that were practiced by indigenous people all over the world, but certainly here. And it's incredibly sad that we have lost so much of that knowledge, and really growing regenerative agriculture and ecosystem restoration, I think, will come in large part from trying to recover or find our way back to some of those practices. And it's a really hard kind of conversation. There's a place called Hawthorne Valley Farm that we work with in the Hudson Valley in New York, that, as with most farms, is on formerly indigenous territory. They had a conversation, they're a nonprofit, they had a conversation with the tribe whose land they were working on, about how to sort of address this. The tribe now is in, I want to say, North Dakota. And they were like, we don't really want our land back because we're not connected to that land anymore, and nobody here really knows the land anymore. What they ended up doing is there's a line item in the budget where basically part of the profit from this farm goes directly to that community, which I think is really cool. But it's a complicated conversation, and also a conversation that can't be avoided, because, I mean, healing, I think one central thing about agroecology and why it's so important, and why it is so healing generally, is that it acknowledges that we are a part of ecosystems, right? So we can't heal the land without healing ourselves, and part of that is healing sort of those past traumas. What we do in conventional agriculture is kind of like, it's basically just like hurting ourselves directly when we hurt the land. So anyway, I don't know if that answers your question, but I am with you that it's incredibly important, and the more connections we can make in this space. I think there is a risk that regenerative agriculture bypasses indigenous communities. It's important that we don't let that happen.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh yeah, yes, Diana mentioned that there's, I'm blanking on the name of that other group. We were all at a this climate day event with the New York Times last November, and the meal for that was prepared by indigenous chefs who have a place in Berkeley, and I will think of the name of that, but I can't at the moment.
It's Cafe Alone.
Cafe Alone.
Okay, Aloni Cafe.
Yeah. I've been dying to go there. The food was really good at that conference. And talk about like story. I think they do that at the restaurant too, the sort of similar to what Gary does with the Climate Farm School dinners. They this is the restaurant in Berkeley. They really wove in just the story elements, like really small things, even of just, why a certain element of a dish was in that dish. Some of it had to do with the land, some had to do with culture, some was just kind of like fun facts, and yeah, it just really changes the experience. Anybody have any other questions or comments about Ryan's journey or regenerative ag, soil health, Climate Farm School? This is your chance. Otherwise, we'll start to wrap up.
I was just going to say, Gianna, we did an interview with Cheyenne Sundance of Sundance Harvest out of, I think she's in Toronto, but it's an urban farm program. But there's the podcast is, she's just like a firecracker and awesome. But you kind of like hear about kind of like the programs and things that she's approaching. And then also some reasons why urban ag is kind of more suited to providing for urban spaces in that interview. I can put it, I think, yeah, that's it. I just put it in the chat for
Perfect.
That episode.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, one thing I wanted to say that I'm a big fan. I think everyone at Soil Centric is a big fan of Climate Farm School, because I think even the name is so immediate, like people get it, like, oh, okay, we need to learn how to farm for the climate. But I'm really excited, just after watching this program for just a year or two, is how many partners that you have created in a short period of time, and how many new opportunities you're bringing online. And to the question earlier, I think it was Abby's question about building more connections in this space. What I see is the Climate Farm School is now partnering with some of our partners that, we've known for a long time, like Piscinas Ranch, or like Regeneration Academy in Spain, and climate, it's just like, oh, we know them. Oh, we know them. And so once you're in this space for a while, it's like there's this convergence that starts happening. And then like, oh yeah, that person was my roommate, or that person is my, my friend's best friend, or whatever it is. There is this openness, and there is this connectivity that starts, like, a lot of us today on this call are in the Bay Area. So it seems like, oh yeah, okay, a couple of us in Colorado, but you can take this conversation globally and people will still be making these connections. And so that's really a very fun thing to be on the kind of, I don't want to say bleeding edge, because that's a weird metaphor, but like on the forefront, that's the word I'm looking for, the forefront of regenerative ag, when it's still so open, when people are still so receptive, well, people will sit down and have coffee with you. They totally want you to join the team. They want you on board. They're going to help you. They're going to put that energy out. And it's not a space where people are shy or deferential or intimidated. It's like, people are busy, sure. And they'll say like, I'd love to talk to you. It might take a few weeks.
Yeah.
But then remind them. So it's not that they don't want to, it's just sometimes, things come up, but overall encourage everyone to just like reach out to Ryan, reach out to your friends on LinkedIn, reach out to anybody you want and say like, I like what you're doing. It's super cool. Tell me more.
Yeah, 100%. I totally agree with that.
I mean, do you have experience like doing that along the way, like reaching out and?
Oh, I mean, yeah, everything. I mean, I cold emailed Michael Pollan one time and he responded to me, which still blows my mind. I'm not guaranteeing that will happen. I think I may have caught him at a good moment, but yeah, I mean, I think it goes hand in hand with the thinking about regenerative agriculture. You recognize that it takes a healthy ecosystem for this to happen. And so I think everybody wants to support all the players and realizes that everybody has something to contribute. But yeah, I'm blown away to be doing what I'm doing now after just a short sort of 6 years ago, leaving grad school and having no idea what I was going to do. It's a testament to how open people are, because I would have thought it would be much harder for me to get to be in this space in this way, but it really is open and connected.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really good note to wrap up on. And we can give some emoji claps or thumbs up or little, I just really like using this reactions button. I don't know why. I like that they've animated it. It just really makes me smile. But Ryan, thank you so much for your time. And everyone, it was so good to see you. There are some follow-up activities as usual, optional ones and ones that we highly encourage in your curriculum document that I sent you, which also has the link in it to Ryan's article. So if you haven't had a chance to read that yet, you should definitely go back and revisit it. It's really cool. Spoilers, but just, or maybe not spoilers, just to give you a teaser, it connects to those photos that Ryan was sharing about Singing Frogs Farms and the abundance of rain that we received in California and on the West Coast this year, and just is such a visual and I don't know, for me, very emotional way of kind of seeing the impact of this work on the land. So highly recommend. I also left Cole's mind maps as part of your personal reflection links in this month's curriculum doc. I didn't want us to abandon those yet. I just think that they're really wonderful ways to think through your next steps. And with that, we will plan on seeing you the first week of July, and then we're going to take a little summer vacation the first week of August and come back together in September refreshed. And so something that you can think about as you work on your goal you were talking about at the beginning of today for the month of June, and you start to think about your next steps, is you've got this nice big window in the month of July and August to really do something maybe a little bigger, maybe invest a little more time, take these summer months to move your journey forward, and then come back and tell us about it in September. So it was wonderful to see everyone. Reach out if you need anything. Oh yes, and Diana, do you want to talk really quickly about just coaching?
Sure. So whoever was in my group, I was saying that Judy Schwartz, who is a Vermont-based author, and I do regenerative climate coaching, and she actually is a trained therapist. So she's really good at this kind of stuff. But as part of the ambassador program, we are offering, so don't forget, climate coaching, complimentary climate coaching. We usually charge people, it's a fee for service for Soil Centric, but not for you guys. And I would highly encourage you, especially if you feel stuck at all, to go ahead and go to the coaching page on our website and sign up for your session. And you can indicate if you want me or Judy. I was saying to the people in my group, pick Judy, because I'm always going to be available. Like, Judy is a rock star. She gets, like, I feel like Kyle and I know a lot of organizations and a lot of people, and then I get together with Judy and she knows 10 times as many. So, and she's just really lovely. But I'm happy to do it as well. So don't forget that, especially, you know, if you want to stay connected while we're on our little summer break, that might be a good time to do it. So, but anytime's fine. So go ahead and sign up for that.
Thanks, Diana. All right, folks, it was great to see you this month. Be in touch if you have any questions. I finally got the last phone numbers from almost everyone. I think I'm only missing one now. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. And then if you're just not in the WhatsApp group yet, you can email me when it's convenient for you and send me your number. All right. Have a great month of June, and we'll see you in July.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
for
Ryan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Caroline.
Bye.
Thank you.
Hey, you two.
Hey.
Hold on, let me stop recording.